Listen, I want to tell you about a guy who changed everything I thought I knew about failure. His name was Marcus Williams, and if you met him today, you'd never guess that 15 years ago, he was sleeping in his car outside a 24-hour Walmart in Detroit, wondering if tomorrow would be the day he finally gave up on everything. See, Marcus wasn't born into poverty. He wasn't dealt a bad hand from the start. He actually had it pretty good growing up middle-class family in suburban Ohio, parents who loved him, decent grades in school. He was the kind of kid who played JV basketball, went to homecoming, had a girlfriend who wore his Letterman jacket. Normal stuff, you know. The American dream in training wheels. But here's the thing about life, it doesn't care about your plans. It doesn't care how ready you think you are. Marcus graduated high school with big dreams of becoming an engineer. Got accepted to Ohio State, had scholarships lined up, the whole 9 yards. His parents were proud, his girlfriend was excited, and Marcus felt like he was right on track to live the life everyone expected him to live. Then his dad got sick. Not just regular sick, stage 4 pancreatic cancer sick, the kind that comes out of nowhere and turns your entire world upside down in about 3 weeks. Marcus watched his hero, this guy who taught him how to throw a curveball and change a tire, become a shadow of himself practically overnight. The medical bills started piling up faster than snow in a blizzard. Insurance covered some of it, but not nearly enough. Marcus made a decision that would haunt him for years. He turned down Ohio State, took his scholarship money, and handed it over to help pay for his dad's treatment. 18 years old, and he chose family over his future without even blinking. His dad passed away 6 months later anyway. Marcus was crushed, man. Absolutely devastated. Not just because he lost his father, but because he felt like he'd thrown away his shot for nothing. His girlfriend went off to college without him. His friends moved on with their lives. And Marcus was stuck in his hometown, working at a factory, living in his childhood bedroom, feeling like a complete failure at 19. But you know what? That was just the beginning. Marcus threw himself into work, trying to drown out the noise in his head. He pulled double shifts, saved every penny, convinced himself that if he just worked hard enough, long enough, he could still make something of himself. He had this plan: work for 2 years, save up enough money, then go to community college and eventually transfer to a 4-year school. Simple, right? Life had other plans. The factory closed down, just like that. One day Marcus showed up to work, and there was a sign on the door. Facility permanently closed due to economic restructuring. 60 people lost their jobs that morning, including Marcus. 2 years of grinding, 2 years of sacrificing his social life and his mental health. And it all disappeared in a single moment. That's when Marcus hit rock bottom. He couldn't find another job that paid even half of what the factory did. His savings ran out within 3 months. His mom was struggling to keep the house after his dad's medical debt, so moving back home wasn't an option. Marcus found himself bouncing between friends' couches, then sleeping in his beat-up Honda Civic, then eventually making his way to Detroit, because someone told him there were more opportunities there. Spoiler alert, there weren't. Marcus spent 8 months living out of that car. 8 months of showering at truck stops, eating dollar menu meals, and pretending everything was fine when he called his mom. He applied for hundreds of jobs: retail, food service, manual labor, anything. But here's the cruel irony: he was overqualified for the basic jobs because of his factory experience, but underqualified for the better jobs because he didn't have a degree. He was caught in this impossible middle ground, watching his life slip away one day at a time. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night in February. Marcus was parked outside that Walmart, engine running to keep warm, when his car finally gave up. The engine seized up completely, probably because he'd been pushing it way too hard for way too long. He sat there in the cold. No heat, no transportation, about $4 to his name. And for the first time in his life, Marcus seriously considered whether it was worth continuing. That's when he noticed the guy in the parking lot. This older man, probably in his 60s, was collecting shopping carts in the freezing cold. But here's what got Marcus's attention: the guy was humming. Actually humming while he worked. Not just going through the motions, but putting genuine effort into organizing those carts, making sure they were perfectly lined up, wiping them down even though it wasn't required. Marcus watched this guy for almost an hour, fascinated. Who finds joy in collecting shopping carts at midnight in February? So he walked over and struck up a conversation. The man's name was Albert, and he'd been working at that Walmart for 3 years. Before that, he'd been unemployed for 2 years after his construction company went under. Before that, he'd served 2 tours in Vietnam, came back to a country that didn't want him, and spent the better part of the 70s trying to figure out how to fit back into civilian life. "Son," Albert told Marcus, "I've been knocked down more times than a training dummy. Lost businesses, lost relationships, lost my way more than once. But here's what I learned, it ain't about how hard you get hit. It's about what you do with the time between getting hit and getting back up." Albert didn't know it, but he was about to save Marcus's life. They talked until dawn. Albert shared stories about sleeping rough after Vietnam, about building a construction business from nothing only to lose it all in the recession, about his wife leaving him when he couldn't provide the stability she needed. But he also talked about the small victories, learning to read blueprints, when everyone said he wasn't smart enough, hiring other veterans, when no one else would give them a chance, finding peace in simple work when complex work had failed him. "Every job teaches you something," Albert said. "Even this one. Especially this one. You learn patience. You learn to find dignity in service. You learn that honest work is honest work. Period." Marcus spent the next week sleeping in the Walmart break room. Albert had talked to the night manager, who agreed to let Marcus crash there in exchange for helping with overnight restocking. It wasn't much, but it was warm, and it was a start. More importantly, Albert became Marcus's mentor. Every night, while they worked, Albert would share life lessons disguised as casual conversation. He taught Marcus that failure isn't falling down, failure is staying down. He taught him that pride is a luxury you can't afford when you're trying to survive. And most importantly, he taught him that every single day is a chance to rewrite your story. Marcus started applying Albert's philosophy to everything. When he finally got a job at a different warehouse, he didn't just show up and do the minimum. He studied the operation, learned how inventory systems worked, taught himself basic accounting principles by watching YouTube videos on the library computers. He treated that warehouse job like it was Harvard Business School, because in a way, it was. Within 6 months, Marcus was promoted to shift supervisor. Within a year, he was managing the entire night operation. But here's the beautiful part. He wasn't doing it for recognition or money. He was doing it because Albert had taught him that excellence is a habit, not a destination. The real breakthrough came when Marcus noticed inefficiencies in the warehouse's inventory tracking system. Instead of just complaining about it like everyone else, he spent his off hours designing a better system. He taught himself Excel, then Access, then basic programming. He stayed up until 3 in the morning, night after night, building a database that could track inventory more accurately and predict demand patterns. When he presented his system to management, they were blown away. Not just by the system itself, but by the initiative. Here was a guy with no formal education, no college degree, who had essentially created a custom business solution from scratch. They promoted him to operations analyst on the spot. But Marcus wasn't done. He'd caught the learning bug, and Albert kept pushing him to think bigger. "Don't just solve today's problems," Albert would say. "Build tomorrow's solutions." So Marcus started thinking about the bigger picture. He noticed that warehouses across the industry were struggling with the same inefficiencies he'd solved. What if his system could help other companies too? He spent another year refining his inventory management software, working with other warehouse managers to test and improve it. He learned about business licensing, intellectual property, marketing, all the stuff they don't teach you in the school of hard knocks. But Albert helped him figure out anyway. When Marcus finally launched his company, Efficient Operations Solutions, he had exactly one client, his own warehouse. But that client became a case study, and that case study became a sales tool, and within 2 years, Marcus had contracts with 17 different logistics companies across the Midwest. Today, 15 years after sleeping in that Honda Civic, Marcus runs a multi-million-dollar business that employs over 200 people. But here's what makes his story special. It's not just about the money. Marcus hires differently than most CEOs. He specifically looks for people who've been knocked down, people who've had to fight for everything they've achieved. His company has hired former addicts in recovery, people who've been homeless, veterans struggling to transition to civilian careers, single parents who've been overlooked by other employers. Not out of charity, but because Marcus knows that people who've survived real adversity bring something special to the table. They don't give up easily. And Albert Albert retired from Walmart 5 years ago, but he comes into Marcus's office every Tuesday morning to share coffee and talk about business strategy. Marcus calls him his chief philosophy officer, and he's only half joking. Albert's name is on the door right next to Marcus's, because Marcus never forgot that sometimes the most important mentors show up in the most unexpected places. But the story doesn't end there, because Marcus learned something that Albert taught him: success isn't just about climbing out of your own hole. It's about throwing a rope down for the next person. Marcus started a foundation called Second Chance Systems. It provides free business training, computer skills, and mentorship for people who are homeless or recently unemployed. They've helped over 3,000 people get back on their feet, and many of them have gone on to start their own businesses. The foundation operates out of a renovated warehouse in Detroit, about 2 miles from that Walmart where Marcus spent the worst and most important 8 months of his life. On the wall of the main training room, there's a quote that Albert shared with Marcus during one of their late night conversations. "Every ending is a beginning in disguise." Marcus speaks at the foundation every month, sharing his story with new participants. But he doesn't start with his success. He starts with that night, when his car broke down, when he was sitting in a parking lot with $4 and no idea what came next. "I thought my life was over," he tells them. "I thought I'd failed at everything that mattered. But here's what I learned: you can't fail at life while you're still living it. Every day you wake up is another chance to rewrite your story." Some people in the audience are skeptical. They're dealing with their own broken down cars, their own empty bank accounts, their own moments of wondering if it's worth continuing. Marcus gets it. He was there too. "I'm not telling you it's going to be easy," he continues. "I'm not telling you that wanting it bad enough is all you need. But I am telling you that your current situation is not your final destination. The person you are today is not the person you have to be tomorrow." Marcus always ends these talks by sharing Albert's most important lesson. Look for the helpers. Look for the people who choose kindness when they could choose indifference. And when you get back on your feet, not if, when, become one of those helpers yourself. After 15 years, Marcus still drives past that Walmart sometimes. Not because he's nostalgic for those 8 months of hell, but because he never wants to forget how quickly life can change, both for the worse and for the better. He parks in the same spot where his car broke down, and he sits there for a few minutes, remembering what it felt like to have nothing left to lose. Then he drives to his office, where he employs people who might be sitting in their own broken down cars right now. People who need someone to believe in them before they can believe in themselves. Marcus's story isn't unique because he became successful. Lots of people become successful. Marcus's story is unique because he understands that success isn't about escaping your struggles. It's about transforming them into strength, and then using that strength to lift up others. He didn't just survive his rock bottom. He used it as a foundation to build something bigger than himself. And Albert was right about everything. The time between getting hit and getting back up, that's where life